Can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So, hey everybody, welcome to the SIG Docs planning meeting. This is our Q3 review, Q4 planning for SIG Docs. I'm Jim Angel. It is October 21st, or if you're looking at the UTC time zone, is October 22nd at I guess it's midnight, or I guess 1 in the morning if you go in the early side. So the first thing I'm going to do is just move these topics up for discussion to the end. And if anyone has anything they'd like to bring up, feel free to add it to this document. Let me just share out this doc in chat. All right. So yeah, as I was mentioning, this is the quarterly review planning meeting. It's the first time I've ran one of these quarterly planning, so please bear with me as we kind of work through this entire process. Normally, it was led by Zach, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. And traditionally, this meeting has been late at night or early in the morning, depending on what part of the world you're in. And I don't think it will be as long as it traditionally has been in the past. Traditionally, it's been around an hour or 30 minutes. Saying that, I might have jinxed us, and it might be just as long, and I'm lying to y'all. So we're going to find out. So first of all, membership updates. We have a new chair joining us, Irvi. So some of y'all might have seen her join on some of the weekly meetings, helping out with some of the localization efforts, and really happy to see Irvi ramping up and helping out with some of the documentation aspects and some of the less than glamorous pieces of being a chair, which is more the administrivia of operational efforts. So that's awesome. And we have a new emeriti. That's Zachary Sarah. And that's really what I was getting at here and saying that this is my first time leading one of these quarterly plannings. Zach would traditionally run these, and being emeritus, it was only right to start to pass the torch and start up with some other chairs hosting this meeting. So I'm doing it for this quarter. Potentially some of the other co-chairs will do it in quarters to come. So to start us off, we'll talk about Q3 in review. And just to be clear, when I'm talking quarters here, for those who aren't familiar, when we're talking third quarter, it's predominantly July 1st through September 30th. And fourth quarter, which we're talking about planning, is October 1st through December 31st. One other thing I'll mention too before we get totally ramped up here is with the fourth quarter ending in late December, usually that's when the holidays hit. So it's very likely we won't have another one of these quarterly planning meetings until either early next year or sometime in January, I would guess. Occasionally we can squeeze that in for KubeCon. Unfortunately, with KubeCon not being in person, it's going to have to be virtual from here on out until we hear otherwise. So reviewing the quarter 3 review wins. Just a quick note here. Some of y'all might have seen that the Q3 wins was blank originally. That is not to say that there isn't any wins or there isn't anything to talk about. And I appreciate some of the additional information getting added here. Traditionally, this is where we would review some of the metrics for Google Analytics as well as the CNCF dev stats. So traditionally, you would look at how many millions of users are viewing our Kubernetes website, what that growth looks like compared to last quarter. And when I started to go into some of the metrics and I started to look at views this quarter compared to last quarter and the growth or trajectory there, and we're a little bit lower than we have been the previous quarter. That's both for PR velocity, PRs merging, views on Kubernetes documentation. I don't think it's a bad thing per se. We're talking, in the 0.5% lower. I think that's just part of the world that we're in right now. Could be potentially due to some of the things going on outside in the world. But I didn't think it's necessarily worth calling out as a win. So that's that. So talking to some of the bullets that were added here, I think one big win this quarter was the formation and kickoff of the localization subgroup. So many thanks to Irvi and Brad for leading that. For those who are not aware, there's a new localization subgroup focused on enhancing that process from a localization perspective. So traditionally we had every localization group learned how to on-ramp to SIG Docs, but after that they were kind of on their own. So every localization would have various different ways to solve similar problems. And the localization subgroup's goal is to over time figure out what those common challenges are, come up with a common process, and help clear that pathway forward. So that's definitely a huge win. I see here there's creation and acceptance of the intro and deep dive sessions for KubeCon North America and new contributor workshop session. So this is definitely a win as well. Once again, we would normally do a contributor summit before KubeCon, but we haven't had any main track KubeCon talks. And so this is a first for SIG Docs, and that's definitely a win. Kind of in flight here for Q3 and Q4, so very topical for sure. And last but not least, I see successful mentoring of contributors. So the new addition of tech leads and new chairs and a stronger leaders as a representative of assisting some of those folks coming into SIG Docs, which I completely agree with. Is there any other wins that people could think of, whether in the docs or not here, if you don't want to bring that up?
That's what I could come up with off the top of my head. I know there's a lot more. I mean, I know I did outreach at my company to get more folks involved. I don't know if we can count that or not, but I know several folks resulted in new contributors from my company.
Awesome. Yeah, I would definitely call that a win. I think any sort of outreach, and one of the things that Zach brought up and talked about at the last quarterly review was this state that SIG Docs is in today. We don't have as many technical writers as we have had in the past. There's not a ton of, I don't want to say endorsement or sponsorship, but I'm struggling to find a better word for it. But there's not a strong presence of a corporate leader in SIG Docs or technical writing here. So one of the things that was brought up is that we're in somewhat of a maintenance mode, keep the lights on, keep PRs rolling. So the fact that we have stayed the same and we have continued our efforts in SIG Docs, I think is definitely a win as well, even though I would say it's a lesser win than maybe in years past when we had more technical writers present and we had more of a driving force behind SIG Docs. So definitely appreciate outreach for sure. I see another win added here about the PR Wrangler program continues to ensure timely response to submitted PRs. So I would definitely boost this too as a successful program. Not only does it improve our PR velocity and our ability to maintain and stay on top of the PRs, but it also will help us figure out who approvers are, or I guess what approvers are active. So we've seen in the past folks who've had the approver status or permissions maybe not be as active in SIG Docs. And so we can use the PR wrangling shift as a way to engage with them regularly, keep them plugged in, and as well as if they get too busy, things happen, potentially move that permission to something more such as like a reviewer or something until they're able to commit the time being an approver again. So definitely agree. PR Wrangler program is pretty successful in keeping up the velocity. In not only from a velocity perspective, but I think that the PR Wrangler speaks a lot to the volume SIG Docs. So one thing that has remained consistent over the past 2 or so years is that Kubernetes/website under the Kubernetes repo or the GitHub repository is the #2 repository for merge velocity, PRs merge, PRs open. So short of the Kubernetes/Kubernetes main project, Kubernetes/Docs is the second most, I guess, active, in the sense of PR velocity and PRs open and closed for sure. And I see successful KEP approval for removing third-party content not appropriate for SIG docs, which I agree with. I'm not sure if that happened in Q3. It might have happened a little earlier than that, but I still see that as an ongoing effort to completely resolve out for sure.
There, I fixed it.
Awesome. Any other wins that folks would want to talk about?
Jim, if you haven't mentioned it already, the giant CSS cleanup that Celeste and Tim and Karen led in the past quarter was a huge benefit. Some of the CSS removals resulted in build times that were like minutes faster because removing all of the post-processing and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. I did not mention that, and I completely agree that the giant CSS cleanup is an incredible win for sure. Thank you. Any other wins folks would like to talk about?
I know Zach's memory's good. Zach, you got to have some more because I'm tapped out.
Oh gosh. Well, we have a Google Season of Docs intern right now who's working on improving the reference docs experience. And he is persisting in the face of, shall we say, significant feedback, and is making some pretty good headway. So I would call that a win. Have we mentioned the 1.19 release cycle and like what a win that was?
We have not, and that is a great point. The 1.16 release is out the door and probably one of the smoothest releases I've seen. Oh, go ahead.
No, 1.19. 1.16 was a year ago.
Did I say 1.16?
That's what I heard.
Oh, what 1.19? I'm losing it. But yeah, the 1.19 release was one of the most successful releases I've seen, in a long time. And that's speaking as someone who's led a release in the past. I'll include my own in that assessment. I thought Savitha did an amazing job at leading the 1.19 release as well as the shadows there, and deserves a lot of credit for improving the process. And I see Anna doing a great job carrying that torch forward as well. So
yeah,
pretty exciting to see that the release is almost becoming boring in a great way.
I don't know that it will ever be boring, but I guess well telegraphed.
Yeah, totally fair. All right, so moving on to some of the challenges we've faced in the past quarter, and obviously the global pandemic making the situation a little stranger than most for a lot of folks working from home, adapting to different situations that have now presented themselves. So one thing that I thought was pretty important that was brought up at the last quarterly review, when we're kind of in the earlier stages of this, I'm not sure what stage we're at in this pandemic now, but I think just the willingness to acknowledge that things can be a little strange and that folks are all dealing with different stuff in their own personal lives, and taking that into account when evaluating, pull requests, Slack engagement. I feel like there's a certain level of engagement that has become expected of SIG Docs as a whole, and I think being aware that things aren't necessarily normal and to take that into account when considering interactions with other folks in SIG Docs is very important. And another challenge, which I kind of alluded to earlier, is that the contributor onboarding in succession. I still think that there's room for improvement for better recruiting, retaining, mentoring new contributors. Obviously, in the win section, we see some things that are working. There's definitely some outreach going on. I don't think there'll ever be too many contributors to SIG Docs or ever too smooth of a process to onboard new folks. And I think growing that is definitely somewhat of a challenge still today. And is there any other challenges folks would want to acknowledge or bring up while we're talking about them?
I wouldn't call it a challenge. I'd definitely say that we have a wonderful group of people that are very friendly to work with, and it makes it a very wonderful SIG to participate in. And it's been that way since the culture was set many years ago, and the culture continues. So I don't know what area it goes into, but it is a really nice culture of a SIG group to work in.
I totally agree to that. I'm gonna put under the wins. I think that's definitely a win to acknowledge that the welcoming, friendly environment that has fostered SIG Docs still continues. And I think that could almost be every quarter, hopefully. But yeah, definitely we'll call that out for sure. Cool. Any other challenges folks want to talk about? All right, hearing nothing, let's move on to the blog update. Caitlin, I see you're on the call. Is that something you would like to talk about for the past quarter, or some sort of the accomplishments over Q3 and what we're looking forward to in Q4?
Yeah, so it's not always super exciting because we've gotten the blog into a really great place with our process and all of that. I think the biggest thing that happened this quarter really isn't so much for the Kubernetes blog itself, but for the contributor site, where which now has its own blog. So this quarter we've kind of tested out and kind of started to decide what content makes sense for the contributor site versus what goes on the Kubernetes blog itself. And the idea is kind of that the Kubernetes dev blog is going to be really contributor specific stuff, and Kubernetes blog will focus more on the end user, with the exception of really contributor articles that are relevant to the greater ecosystem and the greater Kubernetes community and end users as well. So we had one of those blogs this quarter. Thanks to Tim, we got canonical linking implemented on the blog, which is really great. It has not been something that we have had in the past and really needed to implement. So thanks, Tim, for that. And I think that's kind of where we're at with the blog.
Thank you. And I was hoping before the call to take a look at the blogs published in Q3, but I didn't get a chance to grab that metric. I don't know, not to put you on the spot, Caitlin, if you know roughly how many blogs were published in the past quarter or so.
I think it was lower, maybe around 5. I think Q3 was a little bit slower, but I'll drop it on the doc.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. And that might reflect what I was talking about a little earlier, where just, page views are a little down, the PRs are a little slower to merge, but we're talking like 0.5%. And we're talking, very small differences, but potentially Q3 is a little bit slower, very marginally, definitely. So I think that might be in line with what we're seeing.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Cool. So moving forward with the goal review, here's where we have a kind of an informal discussion around the goal review. For each goal, we mentioned if we're going to carry forward for Q4 of 2020. And usually that's done with your thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't think, here we go, I can actually show myself the participants here. If you wanted to not go on camera and you wanted to use Zoom, I believe some people, maybe my Zoom client's really old, I actually don't have the raise your hand or not emoji. Yeah, so that's not going to help. Either way, we can use chat, we can use thumbs up, thumbs down, things of that nature to talk about this. And in a sense, what we do is we review some of the things that have been brought up in Q3, whether or not we want to carry them forward in Q4, and talk about the current status of them. So the very first one that we're going to talk about really doesn't get a vote, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. It's the Kubernetes release. We're going to carry forward the Kubernetes release and the docs there, whether we like it or not. And very fortunately, this go around for 120 and future 121 releases, we're building on what Savitha did in 119. Like I mentioned earlier, Anna's been doing a great job for 120. I see a lot of engagement there as far as how shadows are being onboarded and handled. There's the new Slack channel for the SIG Docs release. And I see a lot of engagement there and a lot of interaction as well. And Anna, I'm not sure if you want to mention anything new going on this quarter or anything, in particular to the 120 release, but if you want to comment on that, that'd be great.
I don't think there's anything new particularly to mention, other than it's actually, we're tracking a lot of features for this release compared to last releases. So like we're tracking 55 enhancements, which is a lot. And that means a lot of docs PRs will be coming in, and it's around KubeCon, it's around Thanksgiving, it's around like December. So I guess wanted to mention that could be like something that we just need to watch out for in the coming weeks. So
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. And as well as when we get near KubeCon and Thanksgiving and some of these dates might become a challenge, feel free to reach out to the SIG Docs Slack if we can help in any way. I know before we had kind of an all hands on deck at some point for reviewing docs and making sure enhancements and features, got merged in a timely fashion. So happy to help out if we can.
oh yeah, so one of the things that I'm gonna try my best to do is proactively ask for reviews throughout the release. I think that's something that we learned last time too, because we had a lot of docs to review in the last few days before the deadline. So I'm gonna keep that in mind and make sure that we bring up the PRs that needs to be reviewed during the SIG Docs, or reach out in the Slack channel and stuff like that. So.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good. And I recall that the little bit of a fire for the 119 release, but yeah, not a problem at all. Cool. The deliverable for 120 is 120. Actually, I could probably just take out this deliverable. And carry forward. Yes, we will carry forward the release process. Cool. Any questions or comments on the 120 release process? All right, hearing nothing, we will move on to thoughts on a web performance subgroup. So this was talked about in Q3, and it was, let me try to catch up here. I believe this was to talk about the overall speed and performance of Kubernetes K8s.io. So like running it through page speed tests, enhancements there. You could maybe say that the CSS work is part of that. I don't know how impactful that would be to actual performance of speed, but as Zach mentioned, it definitely improves build time for the Kubernetes website. But in Q3, Taylor Dozol, only Dole on Slack and GitHub, mentioned that he would like to carry it forward in Q4 and do a research with some folks there. I don't believe there was much effort done. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong on that front. Does anybody have any strong opinions one way or the other about a page performance subgroup? All right, not hearing a whole ton there. So I guess as far as carrying this forward, it's a little tough with Taylor not here. But if you want to react with either a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or maybe you don't really care, feel free to express that either in chat or in video.
I think it's really hard to vote on this one with Taylor not here, but like he wants to move it forward, so I'm like all for it. So
yeah, that's a very excellent point. And I feel like that might be my opinion as well, is if there's not somebody willing to carry this forward, we should not carry it forward, but if Taylor is, then great. Does anybody want to help Taylor run this or lead this forward, or is that the resounding opinion of the group here?
Wait, can you hear me?
Yep.
Maybe you can make it less of a subgroup and just ask him to try to narrow it down a little bit more and make it a little bit more something that he can actually tackle, or try to involve more people with it. So it's going to be tough to do it by himself, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So I think what we'll do is we'll mark this carry forward as maybe. If Taylor is still interested. And then Karen, I've added your feedback above there about narrowing down to maybe an issue as opposed to a working group. I think that's a great idea. For sure, it's a big bite to chew. So I think consolidating that down, you can get more hands on deck. And then if Taylor's not interested, I think that the carry forward obviously becomes a no unless somebody else wants to pick that up and run with it. So no problem there. All right, moving on to the continue work on organizing the task section. Here it says, Karen, you're open to, or Karen to open an issue with objectives and actions. I haven't kept up with this or have any context. I don't know, Karen, can you share a little bit on this?
Sure. I haven't done anything. Let's see. I know that Tim actually, I think, opened the issue for me or did it on his own. And there's been some conversation there. I think he's more interested in reorganizing, and I'm kind of more interested in tagging and adding some metadata. So nothing's been done, I don't think. There has been some work done in the test in general, but I think you can either carry it forward, or you could kind of let us go off and kind of see what's there and where we want to take it on our own without having it as an action item. So it's completely up to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's entirely up to me. I'm happy to remove this from the quarterly planning if you want us to. But if you are willing to run this, I think that'd be great. So would you like me to remove this from the overall like official item, or leave it on? We can track it.
I mean, frankly, I don't know what it exactly means to have it officially on the on deck for Q4, because it's up to the group, really. If you think that it's something that should be on there, fine. If not, I mean, I may actually get back to it. Tim might get back to it. You know, so I have no idea. I'm willing to continue to look at it, but it might be sort of a back burner type thing. So,
gotcha. So my general opinion would be we leave it on here. And I guess what it means to me to have it on this, agenda or action item means that there's some sort of accountability at that quarterly review spot. I know personally I've opened up issues such as updating the release, which I think we're going to talk about later, where it's just been on my personal back burner, and then it comes up for a quarterly review and I say, oh crap, I volunteered to do this and I have no work done on it. So it's a good reminder for myself, but it's not like there's any sort of punitive action for having it on here or not having it on here. So with that, I think it would make sense, leave it on for review. Maybe we touch base on this again in the Q4 review, which would be in January sometime. If there's not a ton of action, then we take it off, make it less formal, and let it be what it is. Does that sound good with folks? Cool. Seeing some nods. Let me just make a note of that. All right, moving on to moderation of some sort for CSS, JavaScript, etc., led by Celeste with Taylor's working group and Tim's support. I'm not sure if this is related to the big CSS cleanup, which definitely has helped out, but this seems to be more focused on creating maybe a team to review that technical level of accuracy for CSS, JavaScript, if I'm recalling the discussion properly. Does anyone on the call have any more context on what this action item was or should be?
Yeah, this is Zach. I do. So I think the genesis of this, if I'm remembering correctly, is the fact that in some of the CSS cleanup, some of the PRs to improve site CSS and performance were sufficiently complex that we had a very shallow pool of potential reviewers. And also that there were some changes introduced to CSS that I don't want to say shouldn't have been, but were not in line with the view of CSS as a whole piece for the site. So I think that the plan was to create a review team of people who could actually like review, give a deep technical CSS review to CSS changes. I think that the plan was to poll both within SIG Docs and also in the wider community for folks who may have deeper CSS knowledge, and add them to to make a special review team for the CSS folder. And I have no idea whether that's done or not, but I think to the best of my knowledge, that was the plan, was to get a specialized team from the wider community and loop them in on reviews for CSS changes specifically.
Cool. Yeah, that definitely helps. My memory about this is definitely coming back. I recall Celeste bringing this up, I believe, at one of the weekly meetings as well, asking for that more of a deep technical review of some of the CSS changes. I don't believe we have any of the major stakeholders here, it's either Celeste, Taylor, or Tim. I guess as far as adopting for Q4, I think it's a lofty goal. I don't know how much action's been carried on there. My general opinion is much like the earlier issue with the Taylor's web performance, is if there's folks who want to drive this forward, I entirely get behind this and support it. I personally don't have the bandwidth to take this on, and I don't know if there's anyone else on this call who would like to volunteer to assist with such a team. I guess I should rephrase that. Is there anybody on this call who would like to assist building such a team?
Can I just mention that I think since we have the new theme, that I think some of the customization has required has gone down. So therefore we have a lot of benefits coming from the theme, which has a broader pool of people contributing to it. And as much as we can leverage the theme and what the theme has to offer, I think that's a good thing. And so I think that there has been a good amount of cleanup with the CS and the JS. There still could be more, but I think that we've reaped some benefit from the theme. So I just think that's a good pitch.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely agree with that. I've seen some improvements come in from updating that sub module, and happy to see it come from upstream as opposed to us leading those changes for sure. Cool. So as far as adopt for Q4, any thoughts or opinions on this? Like I said, it's kind of like the earlier issues. I don't know if there's any real strong opinions one way or the other.
I would be interested in exploring this and just going back to Celeste and Taylor and seeing if we still want to go forward with this. I'm not sure, based on what Karen was saying, I'm not sure maybe it needs to be as formalized as we thought last time around. But I personally think it's at least worth exploring further.
Awesome. Yeah, that's generally what I'm thinking as well.
Can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Can you actually advertise it though? I think that advertise it like, hey, we're, this may be a subgroup, or is there interest in that area? Because I think it would be good to kind of make it provide more information about it. I don't think it was well advertised at the beginning. That's all.
Yeah, I love that. And I definitely think it's something more people are going to be interested in if we mention it. I'm guessing this is on a lot of people's minds.
Cool. Yeah, so if I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like if the original owners are still willing to drive this forward, there's general docs interest on top of driving it forward, actively promoting it, trying to engage or build this type of team would be beneficial. And so kind of carry forward if there are owners, the original owners still interested. Is that correct? Cool. All right, moving on. Localization friendly hyperlinks. This was brought up by Qiming. ERV to lead with Qiming and Karen to make a decision to move forward with it in Q3. I pulled up these issues for review. I don't know, Karen, if you have any further context on here you'd like to provide.
I did not look at the links that you provided earlier. I'm sorry. But I know that Qiming has actually, he wrote a nice script. He's written several, in fact, but a while ago that I believe he is using, in which the script identifies all of the links in a localization that would need to be updated. And so it's really good. I think it's an excellent script, and it could be used by all the teams. So I don't know whether that was discussed in the sub project or not, but it's a nice script, but it doesn't. It's not like it's an automatic thing where it actually converts the scripts. Converts the links for you. So, but it definitely is a good script to diagnose links that need correcting.
Yeah, thanks for
So
mentioning
check
that,
with him.
Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that has not come up in the localization subgroup yet,
Okay.
but I know him well, and I'll follow up. That's something we should get on our agenda.
There's a second script that he wrote not that long ago that also, I can't remember the exact details, but there are two scripts, in fact, that are most recent, and they're both very useful. So check with him.
Yep, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and I just took a quick peek at the pull request that of Karen of your testing script to do that, and I see it was closed in favor of Qiming's, and now I catch what you're saying there. I do wonder, as far as the issue that was opened, 18403, if that's ready to close or not. And I don't have a ton of context in this, so I don't want to go too much into this without further researching. Where is my chat? There you go. But I see it looks like I got closed with the life cycle stale and reopened, and it looks like the last activity was about 14 days ago, and that was the Fedabot closing it out with 90 days of inactivity. So I guess what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's some scripts in place. It sounds like there's some improvement to be done with as far as advertising this with the localization groups. But as far as like carrying this forward, it sounds to me like we're in good shape. Either that issue is stale and stagnant, and as far as adopting in Q4, there would be a no, I'm guessing. But please let me know if someone feels like that's incorrect.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Awesome. So I'm going to mark here, appears to be no. It'd be worth double checking with Qiming. I know that without him on the call, it's a little hard to make that judgment call. So I don't want to say it's not worth carrying forward at all. It just seems like the effort there is enough to close out this localization friendly hyperlinks action item. So let me just make a note here. So moving on to the reduced manual labor burdens, Earview leading, Jim, Tim backing up, and Taylor interested, talking about a link checker. I do recall some progress being made. Earview looking into, I believe, is GitHub Actions for checking some of the links. I don't have an update. I haven't been actively involved in this project or this action item. Anyone on this call have any context on the link checker and where it's at today?
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Why not, right? Okay, so I think there is a PR out to add the link checker, the Go-based link checker, which only checks the English links. I think you could probably find the PR, or I can try to dig it up for you. But I think that's to use GitHub Actions. It's not completed yet. And I think there was some investigation with that. So I don't know the status of it. But as far as Qiming script, that's a possibility that could be used as well. So I'm just throwing that in there as maybe it's an option or an addition to.
I recall there being a functional script that works for checking links. I think the last I recall about the discussion was whether or not to automate it. And as usual, I sort of came out strongly against putting it in the CI unless we can figure out a way to restrict it to run only against certain content. But that's the last that I recall of it.
Yes, Ian shared a website pull request here, and it does look like the one that Karen was referring to enable GitHub Action workflow for link checker.
I mean, I haven't been super supportive of adding it to the workflow to automate it because I feel as it's something that it could be run manually. And if it is automated, what will people do with the information? It's not like it's automated and it will automatically fix the problems. So it's automated, but it's going to tell you. And so somebody has to open a PR to actually fix the link. So I'd be more interested in having people actually be willing to run it and then try to fix things, but that's just me personally. So.
Nope, I'm a strong +1 as well. Sorry, +1 to what Karen just said. I don't think that we should automate something unless we want it to serve as a universal gate check, or unless we can restrict it. And like Karen says, unless we're clear about what people should do with that knowledge, I don't think there's any point in automating the check.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll add a +1 there too. I don't have nearly as strong of opinions on automating it or not, but I do agree with both comments being made, saying that if you automate it and there's no action being taken on it, you are introducing potential kinks in the chain there for merging PRs, opening PRs, or whatever that trigger is for that GitHub action. So I would also be a strong +1 in there. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is to not carry it forward in Q4. Does anyone feel like we should carry this forward in Q4? Hearing nothing major, I'm going to put no for carried forward, but I do think, once again, like the previous action, it'd be worth syncing with Earview to make sure that everyone's on the same page, make sure that Earview agrees. I feel like it might be unfair to to make this decision without Earview's input. So I'll add in here, check with Earview for confirmation. All All right, the next item here, I carried over from the Q3 review. And so Zach, I'm not sure if there's still funding for CNCF to fund contractors for docs improvement. I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit.
There is, it just needs to be well scoped.
All right. So optimizations with CSS and cruft cleanup here for CSS that Celeste was leading. I believe that's related to the massive cleanup effort that was already done and accomplished. So I'm going to actually wipe this from here. Actually, I'll give credit for being done here. Mark it as green. And then improve site load time, performance improvements, adopting Q4. It's the same. This is pretty much similar to the earlier action item. So what I will do is strike that, and I'll just say see earlier performance item. Trying to be slick and use short keys and end up turning on a mic in docs, which I didn't know was possible. Control Shift and S maybe does that. And I was looking for Alt Shift 5. Okay. Cool. And while we're on this topic of contractor funding, is there anything folks could think of or consider for something that might be well scoped and even just pitching an idea and not being willing to fully own that issue? Is there anything that folks could come up with that potentially be a good use of a contractor? Cool. Not hearing a ton from anyone, so we'll leave that as is. If things come up, at least the awareness is there that the CNCF is willing to fund it, considering that it's well scoped and actionable. So definitely something to keep in mind. And I think it's worth leaving this on the quarterly review with maybe without the carry forward, disclaimer on this, just because it's something worth talking about as long as that's still the case.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
All right. Lower barriers to entry with video for before doc sprint days before. So this came up last quarter where I want to say Steve Perry and potentially a couple other folks from SIG Docs brought this up of creating kind of the get started videos for contributing to SIG Docs. If I recall correctly, there was a lot of excitement around it, but there wasn't a lot of ownership for willingness to drive this forward. Looking at the doc that is linked here in the agenda, I can share with the chat here as well. It appears there is definitely a scoped out and outlined what we could create for videos, but not really any action items there. So I guess before I say we're lacking willingness to drive this forward or ownership, let me ask, is there anybody who would be willing to lead this effort forward for as far as creating videos and content for contributors? You can take a look at the outline guide there. And also let me say that by volunteering, saying you're interested in doing something like this is not a full dedicated commitment. Just if you're interested in taking ownership, being the point of contact there. Obviously this could be discussed, through the SIG Docs channel too. So is anyone interested in carrying this forward individually as an owner?
So I just have one comment, and I'm just looking at the video content that was discussed, and all of this is covered in the contributor SIG. Sorry, contributor X or something. Yeah, there you go. So was that considered when this list was made or discussed?
To be honest, I have no idea. I know Contributor Experience does a lot of similar pieces as far as contributing to Kubernetes. but I don't believe they do specifically like, here's how SIG Docs does it. Here's how the merging strategy, things of that nature. I think this is more tailored for SIG Docs, but do you know if they have videos for SIG and TripX?
Well, like every KubeCon, they have something, and that video is always up, right? And I'm looking at the content. If you look at it, it's a lot of like just like good stuff. Like it's not really related to SIG Docs, in my opinion, other than maybe like. Actually, I don't see anything except making a pull request to Kubernetes website. So maybe we should talk about changing the content to make it more specific to SIG Docs then.
I am a recently new contributor, and I can understand the drive for this in that it was the KubeCon videos are rather long and they're out of date kind of quickly, you know, just because of the churn of things. And so it was a rather large thing to read that or to consume those in order to become competent. And but it was comforting to have a video version. Like, you know, I'm kind of a text person, but a lot of people really favor the video. So I can see the drive of this. I'm just reflecting on it. But there seems like there's so much, I think you're so right, Anna, that like a lot of this is just kind of, it's almost like Git should make this for us, right? But to make it all as one video might be, because it will go out of date so quickly when things change. Some of these things may change. And then you have to redo the whole video. It might be better to make them very short demos or something. It's interesting. Is there a problem that it's solving though? I mean, why was it created as a project?
So I believe some of the further context on this is back in the before time when we had in-person meetings and we were able to do doc sprints in person. A lot of that doc sprint, at least the first, first section of it, let's say 4 hours of it, give or take, is spent onboarding new contributors, saying, here's how you configure Git, here's how you sign the CLA, here's how, like, basically the on-ramp to contributing to docs was spent majorly on setting up initially. And then the actual sprint happened maybe after the second half of that session. So I believe the original goal here was to say, hey, if you're attending the SIG Docs sprint, here's a list of videos you can review or watch. And then when they come to the doc sprint, they can get to action a little faster. And maybe people who aren't there could also do the same.
This is goofy, but since this would help all CNCF, as Anna pointed out, a lot of this stuff is relatively generic to any project. Could this be the thing that's proposed to CNCF as a contractor project? Because it could be useful for all CNCF projects. Tell me it's goofy. I'm just.
So I don't necessarily think it's goofy by any means, but what I'm curious though is, if you make them for all CNCF, I don't think it necessarily will benefit SIG Docs in particular. And then also going along the guidelines of being well-defined, I think, and I'm just spitballing here, talking out loud, I think you could easily scope up a draft and say, here's the videos you want. But much like everyone's talking about how quickly they go out of date, those future updates then are going to be a challenge as far as soon as you want to update the video, are you replacing it? Is someone owning that? I think there might be some edge cases there, but I'd be curious to hear Zach's thought on this, being a current member, a current employee of the CNCF.
So I would be for it in theory. Here's the thing. The knowledge and the on-ramp required to be able to create that, a video like that, requires a fairly significant amount of time. And so I guess I'm not convinced that if we pay a contractor to create the video, that we as a community would then continue to maintain that content somehow. It would be like if we knew for sure that we were going to have like 200 people showing up to a doc sprint and needed to create an intro because like one-on-one attention scales poorly in that kind of an environment, then I would absolutely say, sure, that's worth a one-time expenditure. But I mean, video, exactly as Jim points out, video content stales as the contributor workflow changes. And in Kubernetes, like 6 months is a geological age practically. So I don't know that a contractor spend for our particular use case is the best way to go about this. It's not as, I also recognize that it's not as simple as saying, well, we'll just make it, because there's a lot of skill that goes into creating videos with quality. What I would love to see in a funding request is a conversation with SIG Contrib-X about like their own process for maintaining their own tips and tricks, and maybe like working with SIG Contrib-X to use a process, if they've got a process that works well for them, piggybacking off of that process rather than trying to reinvent the wheel ourselves or paying a contractor to reinvent it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the process can be could be critiqued. I mean, like Anna said, right now it's like a kind of a long video that is you know, and we found that it was out of date when we, you know, the latest one was out of date by the time we got to it. I mean, tell me if I'm going too deep here, but it's an interesting problem is, can somebody create the meta process for creating them, right? It's like, it's a screen record. We use this app. We make sure that the document is up to date. You do the document, reading it as you go, making commentary. You know, we track it in Git in some way. And that means that they're triggered to be updated when the relevant docs are updated, or, I mean, but they're smaller chunks instead of the hour-long video that's currently being made. Maybe, I mean, we might be getting a little bit too deep in the weeds here. So.
Yeah, and definitely this is something that we could further discuss potentially on like the SIG Docs Slack channel. But yeah, I think this conversation is very healthy and in the right direction. We're agreeing that, you know, short snippets of videos would be good, and having a matching processor, whether it's a meta processor or not. I think there's general alignment there. I think what we're lacking is a clear owner to say, all right, I'm going to guide this through for an entire quarter. A meta process would be a great outcome for something like this, or a path forward. And I don't think something like this exists, but what I think would be great is something like, there's the LaTeX text editor where you can write basically a document as code and then publish it in any sort of different format you want. It's kind of like writing in Markdown. The benefit is it's easily, you know, formattable or changeable once you've actually created the Markdown. The theme could then be laid on top of it, you know, and that's really what I would love to see something like this have happen, is the ability to make those minor changes, those nits, you know, for, oh, this is now called this, or this has been changed here, or, you know, making those edits where it's not like, oh, you know, we've changed this one thing in SIG Docs, now we've got to recreate a 10-minute video on how to contribute, you know. So I don't have an answer for that, but my overall gut feeling is we don't have a clear owner on this, unless there's somebody on the call who would like to take this or take a look at it.
I would like to bring up that I don't think a how to use Git video would be very helpful, but I do think a video about building the docs locally and running a local preview video would be more helpful and more specific to this project.
Well, I think you make a very good point. That would be a very helpful video. I think the little bit of context was, when we do the doc sprints, we were spending so much time having to get people signing the CLA, getting their Git configuration set up. So I don't disagree with you, but I just want to make sure we remember the original purpose for the video that they were Jim was talking about, which was to streamline our ability to be more productive in the conference sprints.
I see. I'd be willing to drive kind of looking at videos in terms of a limited scope and some smaller videos.
Cool.
I think that's a great suggestion because if you could break up the the little pieces of what we'd have to do for getting the CLA signed and configuration, maybe 3 out of the 4 pieces don't go out of date, and we do have get more value out of it. So that's a great suggestion.
I agree.
I feel like an interloper, so I haven't been ready to volunteer for something, but I have some experience and I'm very interested in how this sort of thing works. So I'd happily work with somebody on that. I don't, like I said, too much of an interloper to say that I should take ownership over anything, but let me help.
Sounds great.
Awesome. So I'm hearing, is it Jeffrey or Joffrey?
Jeffrey's fine. Thanks.
Jeffrey, awesome. So Jeffrey, appreciate you stepping up for that. And Joel, I have you down here as willing to pair up. So I think with the owner on this, makes it easy to carry this forward. And I think what we should do is move forward with that extra item to look at smaller scopes. Joel willing to pair up on that. And then we can review it again at the Q4 review, like I said, probably in early January, and see what the updates are then. Does that sound good with everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Appreciate y'all's help. So the next item is the remove third-party and dual source content. I know a bulk of this work has been completed, and talking about how do we close up for good. And this came up at a SIG Docs weekly meeting, and it was more about outlining the contributor guide to have clear, I guess, verbiage on what is third-party content, what is not. And so if there ever was a PR that could be flagged for removal or not approved, you could link to a direct, specific set of documentation in the Kubernetes contributor website. I don't believe we have that today, and I don't believe we have anyone leading that effort. It's kind of funny. I don't think this is really for question of whether or not to carry it forward for Q4. I think this is more about closing the loop on there. So I think this might be worth moving to more of a weekly discussion, or move it to the weekly meeting rather than the quarterly review, and see if we can't close the loop on third-party content. Do folks have any other further, I guess, context on this or opinions?
Jim, I'm sorry, I don't have the document open. Can you, sorry, let me just take a, oh, that's not it either. Do you mind reading what the specific action item is?
So this one just says 119 has passed. How do we close out for good ?
I see. Yeah, that there's still lots of third-party content and dual source content that needs to be removed. I think it would be a great sprint, honestly. I don't know. There hasn't been a ton of enthusiasm for like pursuing it as an ongoing project. Like Tim, I know, has opened a few PRs to remove content, and there have been a handful of other folks. But in terms of like a well-coordinated ongoing effort, nothing has emerged. So I think like I like your suggestion, Jim, of shelving it without forgetting it. I really do think it would be an excellent, like the core of a sprint. One thing I do want to note about third-party content is that we've faced some pushback within the SIG about removing some content that absolutely fits the bill for removal, but because I don't know, for whatever reason, folks feel attached to it or worry about it. They've pushed back on removing it. And it's, I guess I want to make the point here, as I've made elsewhere, that the time to discuss all of this, there was an ample 5-month-long comment period for whether or not to pursue a removal policy with these specific criteria. That period passed with abundant comment, and all of that's been folded into the form that the final PR actually took. So at this point, it's a done deal. Let's not relitigate whether or not to remove content. All of the discussion happened. It's on us now to fulfill the policy that the community agreed that we would take on. So, I mean, have all the feelings you want about content, but if it doesn't meet the policy, let's treat it accordingly.
And Zach, the policy is already well documented, correct? We've got we could
Yes, it
point to
is.
the cap. We can, so we don't have to like re-add that to a style guide or contributors guide necessarily. I mean, it really is just something we need to make sure the approvers are aware of and familiar where to find as they worry about what they approve.
Yep, it's in the contributor guide.
Okay.
Can I say something again?
Absolutely.
So just a suggestion, maybe it's something that the group would like to, if we can't have a sprint's a great idea, but to maybe periodically or make it something that you do every couple of weeks is come up with a list of content that should be looked at for review and for removal. And that way, at least it brings it to light so that people, it's not a shock if their content does get removed. So it's something that's out there and says this, we think this needs to get removed and why, or not why, but a point to the content guide. But I think at least identifying it, otherwise it's not there. Maybe there's still a list of pages that should be removed or content in a page that should be removed in the issue. There's an issue that's open, right? So I think just keeping it active is probably the way to go about it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And so it sounds like the best path forward would be to move this to the weekly meetings, not lose track of it, make it a regular effort to continue the discussion. And as Zach alluded to, is that we have the policy in place, it's clearly defined. And so it's not really a question about whether or not certain content should be removed. It's more or less saying this is the content that's going to be removed and here's why, basically.
So have we thought about, we used to do what were called bug squash days. And so maybe a process where if you see the third-party content, but you don't have time to remove it, maybe you could open up an issue. And then as we get a whole bunch of them, maybe we'll pick a day and call it not bug squash, but third-party squash. And then we'll just sit there and people just start trying to knock off removing the third-party little sections. It's kind of like a sprint, but not so tightly coupled with, our sprints are typically tightly coupled with conferences.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Is it something you would like to help lead or organize?
It's going to be a while before I can take any more leading on, but I think just a policy of just letting people know if they see third-party content that they don't have time to remove, if they could just open up the issue and then once we get some bulked up, we could revisit it. I mean, and maybe it could even be low fruit items. I don't know. Hey, you just need to go remove this section.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And, I think what this would lack is someone to take the initiative and say, we're going to do a docs removal day or a docs removal event, and we're going to all meet together and publicize that on the docs channel But as far as the overall idea, it's great. You know, let's label content, let's open issues, let's track this in the weekly meeting. And if somebody wanted to organize something like a major docs purge, I think that would be well supported by SIG Docs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little tight on time until my latest book is done. The Riley's kind of beating me up that we're a little behind, so I've got to be very careful until that's finally done, and then I'll be able to be a little more aggressive with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, no worries at all. And I don't mean to guilt trip you into thinking that you have to be the only one. There's a reason why I'm not saying yes as well, so I totally understand. Cool. So as far as carrying forward, I'm going to say no for carrying forward, but move to a weekly discussion.
Great.
All right. So remove unnecessary complexity, align docs with certification exams, lowering the bar for understanding Kubernetes. I took ownership of this. I have not done any work on this. There has been some conversations between the CNCF and the CKA Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam and how we can better align there. I don't believe there's any formal outcome. So I'm going to give myself a poor rating of 0. Maybe arguably a 0.1 or something similar to that with some of the discussion going on. But
give yourself at least like a 0.2 or 0.3. Those conversations were actually really meaningful.
Yeah, no, I would agree that they were meaningful, but I don't think there's any action from them other than just raising awareness. I don't know if you feel differently, Zach.
Well, I think, sorry, hang on. I think that the willingness to act was there on our part. That, if I recall correctly, it came down to the willingness of the exam admins on the CNCF side to provide really specific information about test content and whatnot. And I don't recall them ever following up. And I remember prompting them at one point and still not getting a response back. So I think it's fine to accurately assess the state of progress, but I would like that accuracy to include that we were present and willing to engage in that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very fair. So as far as carrying forward, I feel like we've kind of talked out loud about this, and it's really like the willingness is there. The ball's not really in our court, and so I would vote this in a sense of no, let's not carry this forward, but willingness to act if asked upon. Folks think that's fair?
So I just want to bring up one thing as well. I know this isn't about the past quarter, but there is a new cert test coming up, the CKS. And this is something that I might be able to help drive as well, because the company I work for, we do a lot of training with the CCAT exam and the CKS exam in the near future. But I think we have to look at how the docs align with the CKS test that's coming up in a few weeks. And also with the new CKA exam, it was updated in September as well. And let me drive this, since I am also pretty involved with those exams.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. Appreciate you stepping forward for that. The one thing too I would mention is with Savita's involvement in I always screw this up, the SIG Security Docs channel and the subgroup going on there. It might be worth pairing up with them and making sure that there's alignment there as well. As far as the revised CKA exam, I did assist with some of the creation there. Now, it's a lot of the stuff is under NDA, but from what I can recall from that CKA exam, the content and the documentation presence needed to take that CKA exam hasn't changed, in the sense of there's nothing in the CKA exam that's not in the docs, essentially.
Yep.
more or less. So the CKA shouldn't be as big of a concern there, in my opinion. But the CKS one, definitely, I haven't taken it. I don't have any context in it. So I think pairing up with that SIG and taking ownership there would be great. And go ahead, did you have a comment or question? I think you might be muted there.
Sorry. So I actually took both CKS and the new CKA as beta tester. I can't give any, detailed information about it, but all I can say about those is CKA, no problem. It's basically this new scope is more like narrowing to the administration rather than like running workloads and stuff. So it shouldn't be a problem. But CKS, I couldn't get information, like much information to complete the exam on documents because like a lot of new concepts such as, hardening Kubernetes clusters, running runtime security on top of Kubernetes and such. These information are completely lacking on the documents right now. So yeah, as for the aligning, I think there will be some there will be some necessity of improving the documentation and like adding contents depending on the demand, I think. Also, I had to take the survey after taking the exam. What was like precisely not enough to complete the exam. So maybe if they take our feedbacks correctly, I think CKS team would add some contents on doc, but I don't know about that. So yeah, I think we should work with them if we want to make it better.
Awesome. Yeah,
Can you
so what I did
get
is
the certification? Can you just get the certification people to read the docs and mark up what's missing? I mean, instead of getting content from them, getting work from them.
Sorry, what was the statement or question?
I'm sorry. Is instead of trying to get them to tell us what's missing or get them to tell us the stuff inside the training, can they just review the current docs and like call out what's missing? Well,
Yeah, I think this CID, sorry, I'm trying to walk and talk here. I do think this is slightly a more complex issue in the sense of there's different people within the CNCF that are creating the content, that are creating the questions, that are creating the exam overall. And then I know that they partner up with individuals in the Kubernetes community to create the test questions and what the answers look like and defining the criteria there of, what is passing this question versus not and how the grading criteria is. So I don't know if they would have an idea of what docs they're looking for, but potentially the working group or the folks that they have writing the doc or writing the test could help with. But I think that's definitely something that Ray, as you mentioned, you could help run with. More than happy to get you in touch with the CNCF folks there if that helps. But I think it might take an ambassador from SIG Docs to help kind of connect the dots there, at least from what I've seen or known. Cool. And so what I ended up doing is I broke out the unnecessary complexity and aligned docs to certification exams that I was taking ownership of. I'm still going to leave that as no, but willingness to act, as I feel like there was some effort there that's kind of left on standby. And then I've created a new action item or a new list for tracking about aligning specifically the CKS certification exam. I think with Kohei's experience as well as my own, the CKA is most likely in a good shape when it comes to documentation. But it sounds like CKS could definitely use a review and an extra set of eyes on that. So I appreciate, Ray, you taking that, and we'll add that to our list here. All right, moving on. I see here continue to drive the localization subgroup and its goals added by Brad. Any comments on this, Brad, that you'd like to add?
I think we've got great potential. I just want to make sure, I think you scheduled the next meeting, right? You put it on the calendar?
Yeah.
I don't remember what the date was. I don't recall seeing the date, but I think we have lots of great topics. We got lots of great topics, and we've got lots of great folks with really cool expertise. And I think it's going to do really good to have that tribal knowledge sharing that we're doing.
Awesome. Feel kind of goofy asking this, but does anyone feel like we shouldn't carry this forward? I think we're full steam ahead. A solid yes on that. And I think that the work being done there for localization is beneficial on multiple layers there, especially connecting the different teams. Like I was mentioning earlier, it seems like folks were inventing their own processes and solving their own challenges when they shared a common thread of localizing the Kubernetes documentation. So yeah, this is awesome work. So moving on to the year-long 2020 goals, or I guess before moving on, does anyone else have any sort of, I guess that'd be more of the proposals then. As I say, do you have any more goals to review? But this would be things that were set in Q3 that we're talking about now. So I would imagine if they were in the Q3 doc, they probably don't need to be added here, but give you an opportunity to bring that up if that's the case. All right. So moving on to the year-long 2020 goals, and real quick, just wanted to time check with folks here. I know we've been going at it here for a little bit of time. I did lie to everybody and said this is probably going to be quicker than historical quarterly meetings. So my apologies there. Do folks need a break right now, or are we okay trudging forward still? People indifferent? We're good. Rolling ahead here. Can we go ahead and take a break after this, or knock all this out as well? I don't think the proposal will take 45 minutes, but I might have just jinxed that one as well. All right. So moving on, and feel free, folks, if you need to take a bio break or anything like that, feel free to turn off your video or whatever and do what you gotta do. Like I said, this is a relatively long process here. So moving on to the year-long 2020 goals, improving the docs process here, where it says review PR review process for PR wrangling. Yeah, so I'm not sure if this improving docs process is overall SIG docs. I don't really remember the exact scope on this. And without Celeste here, I don't really know if we can accurately discuss any actions being done there. I know PR wrangling has been going well. Does anyone on the call have any further context on the improving docs process for the long-reaching 2020 goal? Hearing nothing, I think this is safe to put a resounding maybe on, and I will follow up with Celeste and see if there's anything there to track. All right, so for automating major and minor release content, so create a process that shifts updating release content to the release team, release nodes, and create a new releases page. The assessment's at a 0.5 from Q3, and I think it should stay at assessment of 5. There is an issue that I'm not going to be able to pull up very quickly here, where I opened it to track. We've made some progress, about 0.5 worth of progress, as far as switching the SIG Docs merge strategy. But as far as automating with the Kubernetes release tool, Krell, there hasn't been much effort there. I think mainly because there's a few things up in the air. There is a downloads, there's a Kubernetes release page that has been merged into Kubernetes, one of the release teams. So it's like a way to go to a web page and see what the current releases are. So a quick way to see what the latest binaries are for Kube API server, for kubectl, you name it, you can go there, click a link and download it. There's some active effort started by Tim to use the GitHub API to pull in the different versions and create a list there, which somewhat conflicts with this downloads page, and there's a lack of direction on that overall initiative. And I believe I saw, I think it was Karen who commented about just what's the status update on this release page, because we've been in this kind of limbo for about 2 quarters now. So I would still like to look into automating it with Krell. I'm still willing to own that, but there's kind of a lot of various pieces there. There's automating the release notes. There's the actual tooling that can be used to automate some of the release content. I think this could use maybe some scope clarification, if anything. I think right now it might be too broad, but in general, I'm still interested in at least the Krell automation piece of that. Any questions or comments? I know it's kind of all over the place there. It is a complex, it's a complex area to cover, and I guess one bullet point, but Karen, do you have something to add?
I was just going to say that I think it's important to keep it, but I also think it's important to maybe have a meeting or a session where you introduce what KREL is or Krell is, because I think from the docs team, I kind of stay. I'm not as involved with the release team as you are, and so I have no idea what that tool does. So I think it's important, maybe there should be an introductory meeting, or at least a little workshop or something that explains what it is and how docs could benefit from it, or the integration with it or whatever. So that's all.
Awesome. Yes, strong +1 to that. I know there's that kind of weird blurry line between docs and the release team, and 100% agree. Some more education and just introductions to the Krell utility, and to be totally frank with the folks on this call, is I wasn't too familiar with the tool myself, and I think that was a lot of my reluctance to get involved with changing a lot of the coding behind there. But as of roughly a week or 2 ago, I worked with the release engineering team to cut a Kubernetes release, which is predominantly driven by this Krell utility. So I feel a little bit more comfortable about using it. I feel a little bit more comfortable about giving that introductory meeting. So I think we're in good shape to kick something like that off alongside scope clarification. Cool.
So I got one more thing to add about Krell and automating release notes. So since January, there is a new Krell subcommand to generate release notes, and the process to automate generation release notes it's hard to say if it's done or not. I was part of that team until recently, so let me go check with the release notes team on how far that automation.
Awesome.
So that actually reminds me, they actually recorded a video of onboarding the shadows with this tool, and that video is shared, and I could share that link. I don't know if this covers, I didn't watch it, so I don't know if this covers the things that we're looking for, but it might be worth watching. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Do you mind sharing that either in the agenda or on the chat here when you get a chance?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you. And Ray and I'll definitely keep both of you in the loop as we further learn more about how we can use Krell for the docs automation piece. And I believe I kept a little bit up with the automating release notes, if I'm not mistaken. There was historically the issue where maybe a pull request needed release notes that were there but not present, or needed but not present, or they were present but not adequate enough. And so the tooling, I believe, allows the release team to go in and substitute certain release notes for certain PRs to either be more clear, be more specific, link or reference certain documents or CVEs that have came out, just making the overall generation of those notes easier, the release notes. All right. So this is from proposal semi-related. I don't believe that's the case anymore. And I'm actually going to give this a new header here. So this one is about stale content, an opportunity to automate or prune, led by SIGs or users. I took ownership of this issue itself. This is an ongoing issue. There hasn't been much work done that I'm aware of, but essentially the problem is we don't have a system in place to identify stale content or content that needs to be updated, that hasn't been touched in a while, is inaccurate, pretty much needs revision, needs review, needs improvement. And so the goal here was potentially adding metadata to markdown docs of different SIGs who own certain pieces of content, potentially writing a script that would say this page hasn't been updated in X number of days, maybe ping the SIG and make sure it's still accurate to a certain degree. There's a lot of great ideas, and I think it's still a worthy effort to continue on tracking. But personally, I haven't made any progress on this. So my vote would be a yes, but I don't know my involvement or ability to, within a quarter, make significant progress in something like this. Do folks have any questions or comments or willingness to help drive this? Not hearing a ton. I will put down that we'll go ahead.
Sorry, I was a little late to get to the mute button. This is something that actually sounds really interesting. So if that's something I can sort of put my name down for, and then maybe I can follow up to see.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So as far as next steps for this, I don't know if you want to get in touch with myself, or I know Celeste is willing to help out with this and just brainstorm ideas. Really, I think it just takes action. Figuring out how many docs are out there, what kind of metadata would need to be added, what does the process look like. There's a lot of meta processes to this overall evaluation that need to be kind of hashed out, and I see that as the next couple steps there. So thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll follow up. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And I'll put for review in Q4, Q1. All right. Moving on, KubeCon doc sprints, unfortunately, are still postponed. I kind of left this in here, not necessarily as a joke, but when we first did our quarterly review and we talked about real life events being postponed, for some reason I thought maybe it might not be the case now, and it might be a little different. Unfortunately, I don't see in-person conferences returning anytime soon, so just kind of leaving this as a reminder that it is worthy to track the KubeCon doc sprints. Unfortunately, in-person events are kind of in limbo, I guess. Moving on to the API reference generation, and sorry to punt this one to you, Zach. I know we've touched on this one earlier. We talked about the Google Seasons of Docs involvement in some of the reference generation pages in progress there. I didn't have the correct context to properly assess this piece here. I don't know if you have any additional context.
Sure. So what, I guess, gosh, how to do fast context. This has been a goal of mine for 3.5 years, improving the quality and the experience of generated API references. When we migrated to the Doxy theme for the website, Doxy offers built-in support for rendering Swagger specs or OpenAPI specs in a pretty way. What we've discovered, and what Philippe has discovered, Philippe Martin is the intern who is doing this project. What Philippe has discovered is that the way that Doxy renders an API spec isn't resource centric. It doesn't start with the actual API resources that people use. It follows the actual spec path, which is, I suppose, technically correct, but distinctly unhelpful. it doesn't follow actual cognitive patterns that humans use. So if you want to see an example of what, let me see if I can find it really quick. It's K8sref.io. Let me paste the link really quick. I pasted it into Zoom chat. This is what a resource-driven spec or reference generation looks like, and this is ultimately what we'd like to preserve. This also reflects the current state of how API references are generated in the documentation. They're just not rendered in a pretty or easy to render way. So the good news is that Philippe also built this site, the K8sref.io. Tim and Karen and Qiming have both given extensive feedback to Philippe about things to consider in implementing Doxy's Swagger support. And the deeper that folks dive into feedback, the more apparent it is that Doxy likes to do things in a very specific way, and it's very difficult to get Doxy to deviate from that path. But that there are options. So what Philippe is doing right now is looking at a way to adapt K8sref.io, the logic driving how this is rendered. He's looking at how to include this in the website repo in a way that doesn't create like a site mini game. So I spent some time reviewing the code base with him earlier for how to generate this, and I have some concerns. I think my chief concern is that this the logic underpinning how K8sref.io is rendered isn't very user friendly or very maintainer friendly. Sorry. So right now there's the semantic logic, the render logic, and the view logic aren't separated. So if you want to do things like change the layout or the color, you're playing in Go rather than in CSS. And that's obviously not tenable for our maintainer base, or frankly, like it's not good practice to have the view logic intermingled with the render logic, or the reference generation logic. So I guess my principal feedback to Philippe about taking this approach is to follow best practices, make sure that this doesn't create a site within a site, and to cast an eye towards developer happiness as a chief outcome, but also maintainability over the long term. So I think Philippe has heard my concerns and is working to alleviate them. I know that if you look at, he's got a pull request open. I don't have that particular tab open right now, but if you look at that pull request, it's I'll put his GitHub ID in Zoom chat as well. If you search for PRs authored by him, it's in the open PR list. If you look at the preview for the PR that he has open right now, you can see both the Swagger rendering in Doxy and also the K8sref rendering. And so I guess it's possible to see and give feedback about both approaches. Although at this point, I am going to ask folks I'm going to ask Philippe to consider closing his current PR and opening a new one that focuses on the implementation of this particular logic for K8sref.io, rather than trying to make sense out of the current extensive backlog of feedback for an approach that may no longer be relevant here. So I'm going to ask him to close this PR, open another one, and I would ask folks to focus on the maintainability and focus on, I guess, like an MVP, a minimum viable product, rather than looking at all of the things that could be better, looking at the things that are required for this to merge, and making sure that it's iterable after that point. And the iterability is, I think, the chief concern. So that's what I've got. Any questions about that?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the deep context on there, and definitely understand a lot more than I did coming into this. Anyone else have any questions or comments regarding the generation docs? All right, yeah, so hearing nothing, I know this is one of those, longer goals, the 2020 goals for docs, and this isn't really a question of whether or not to carry it forward because it is a Google season of docs, but definitely something worth keeping an eye on for sure as there's progress being made. Quick side note, I did find out recently that it's called Google Season of Docs instead of Google Summer of Docs or Google Summer of Code, because the original creator of Google Season of Docs lived in, I believe, Australia or somewhere where it wasn't summer during this time.
Oh, yes.
And do you have more context on that, Zach? Because I only heard that in passing. I was like, that is interesting. It's not the summer of docs, it's the season of docs, and thought I'd share.
Yeah, it's Sarah, I'm trying to remember her last name, Sarah Maddox, lives in Australia. And yes, for her, it's deep winter. I think by the time that the season concludes, it will be summer for her and winter for us. So yeah, it's a more global friendly name.
Definitely. Cool. So in the agenda, we have a 10-minute break here. With the 2 remaining proposals that I see, I would be happy just to move forward and hit these proposals and call it. But do folks feel like they need a break or move forward? Hear nothing, let's power forward. All right, cool. So the first proposal that's brought up here is the great beast of capitalization. So this was brought up. There's been a few emails on the SIG Docs mailing list, generally about our capitalization. What do we call an object? How do we identify the different objects? There's a lot of opportunity to bike shed on this, but I think it's a worthy goal that we're trying to obtain is how do we make the information easier to consume, make it easier to read, make it understood by more folks. I think the effort is definitely a worthwhile effort. But I'm not sure if somebody wants to give a little bit further context on what the proposal is. I doubt we will come to a unified standard or anything in this in this meeting here, but is there anything we can outline and share? So feel free to take that away if anyone would like to.
I'm Jeffrey. I'm the person who added that. I added it because, like you said, there's been some random discussions, and I wanted to consider the best way to consider them more in a more organized way. So I linked a specific pull request I made talking about right now the style guide prohibits saying explicitly like the term object. And I'm suggesting we change the style guide to say it's okay to use object where it would help clarify what you're talking about, but don't overuse it. So that's a specific example of a change I'd like to make. But if anyone has any, since I'm very new here, if there's a better avenue to have this discussion, I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Well, I think that specifying when we're referring to an object would actually be helpful because as the discussion on the email list went, one of the, I think what emerged quickly from that discussion is that there is no easy way to provide like universal capitalization guidelines that apply to all things in all situations, precisely because it gets really difficult to disambiguate when you're like referring to something like a capital O object, the object. So I think like adding a greater, I guess, adding greater specificity in language when referring to various components or specifically to objects would actually be helpful. I'm not sure that we can fully define overuse, but I think we know it when we see it. So if we're comfortable with a certain degree of ambiguity, or I guess fuzziness around what constitutes overuse, then I think it would be a worthwhile change to make.
I agree.
When I start documentation projects from the ground up, I still use the Microsoft style guide, the MSTP 4.0, which I think was last updated over 10 years ago. And it and I love it so much. I think I'll get the whole thing tattooed on a microdot somewhere on my body, but it does not use capitalization as distinctions for anything that's not a brand or a proper noun. And blending that is something that I just, from my perspective as somebody who does documentation, I find hard to adopt, right? And it's, you know, the use of a standardization of bold and italics is generally how one specifies things elsewhere. I'm just putting that comment out there from an old hand. It's a new word.
Yeah, and I think so. It's kind of like multiple different pieces here, and we're talking about, you know, capitalization, talking about, you know, declaring when something is an object or when it's not. You know, I'm personally in the opinion of, if folks feel strongly enough about something and they're willing to create the PR, engage with the wider community, get general, you know, alignment there, I'm 100% for the discussion. I don't have an incredibly strong opinion on the outcome. I have a stronger opinion on the folks willing to do the work and make the changes needed to see those changes reflected in the docs. I believe Zach ultimately reflected similar sentiments in the email thread saying, you know, if you want to open up a PR and propose these changes, let's have the discussion in a PR or in an issue. And I think as far as a quarterly proposal, I don't know if this necessarily needs to be a quarterly discussion to be had. I'm not against having the discussion quarterly as well. It seems more properly something that could be, you know, squashed or discussed in a weekly meeting per se, alongside an open PR like you have here, or you know, similar. I've done the work. Here's, you know, what I believe we should be doing. Here's why X, Y, and Z, and having that future discussion will be very valuable. And I guess my question would be, has that not been the case, Jeffrey? Or I guess what would be your expected outcome for something like this?
I guess my expected outcome for this would be a discussion about the pain, like the challenges people are having, if there's a particular reason why we've suggested capitalization in the past, if anyone has any localization concerns to bring up, and then to make sure we're on the same page as I perhaps produce a, you know, move forward with this pull request and perhaps do a second one. So if you think the right form for that is one of the weekly meetings, that sounds good to me.
Awesome.
I have thoughts and opinions, but I've got chocolate in my mouth. Give me like 5 seconds.
I would also say that, speaking as a new contributor, the style guide was fine. Like, I understood what the rules were and I was able to consistently apply them. as they are. And that's the thing that I really care about, is like, if I know if I'm right or if I'm wrong, and then a reader can see it consistently.
Yeah, so I don't know that this frankly needs more discussion. It's received, if anything, too much discussion, in the sense that there is a well-documented abundance of opinions and not a whole lot of driving forward. Having opinions is easy. Getting things done isn't so easy. I am willing to entertain changes. We had a new contributor out of that discussion, and I feel bad for her because I don't think that her new contributor experience was very quick or very easy. I think it was fairly representative in that it was a change that was processed a lot and got a lot of review. But I don't know that it's the sort of experience that people would say like, yeah, wow, sign me up for more of that. That is, I don't know that that's anything that we need to worry about or change over much, but I do want to see a greater bias towards action rather than processing down to the bottom of every possible iteration of an opinion and its implications. I think that the style guide is fine too. I think we could have better examples in it, but I don't feel any great need to remedy capitalization for the style guide. I think the context for the reason we were having the discussion in the first place is that folks from Red Hats came over and said, we're not clear about how to apply these guidelines to our own documentation. Can you be consistent with how you're doing it? I'm all about collaborating and making sure that the community is mutually intelligible and smoothing the path for the developer experience as much as we can. At the same time, Jeffrey, I think the title for this proposal was very apt in calling it the Great Beast, because there is no satisfying it. So I think that the specific proposal that you have made about allowing object to be used in documentation judiciously, I think that's a very reasonable accommodation to make. And I feel like I've already talked too much about this. So I guess I would put it at, yes, let's move forward with the specific proposal that we have, and let's not waste a whole lot more time working through every possible iteration of it.
So I agree with you. Tim commented on my pull request that he thought it should be brought up for further discussion, and he put like do not merge on the pull request. So if people seem genuinely fine with the specific proposal, I'm happy to push back and say I don't think we need further discussion on this, or to say like we talked about it in this meeting, let's move forward.
I think that's absolutely appropriate to come back with a comment and said, hey, we discussed this at annual planning. Here was the discussion, here's the consensus, hold cancel.
Okay. Sounds good, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to echo that too. It doesn't necessarily need to be pushed back. It's I think the discussion was just had, and it sounds like there's general alignment there that action speaks louder than inaction or opinions, and it's only the specific PR is good to go.
Okay, great. That's all I have on that topic. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, appreciate you bringing that up. And like I said, as these come up in the future, I do think, bringing them at a weekly meeting, we can hash it out. And once again, have that bias for action would definitely be the overall overarching opinion, I would say. Cool. Any other questions or comments around the great beast of capitalization? And it's also kind of ironic, all in capital letters, or all starting with capital letters. All right, moving on to the last and final proposal here about removing manual steps from the release. Anna, I don't know, do you want to take this one or talk a little more about it?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people on the call are not very familiar with the release process for the docs, but so what really comes down to is that there's an enhancement that's gonna be part of the release, and that enhancement owner creates a docs PR if needed. And then what our team does is basically add the labels like milestone, and then we make sure that the code was merged before we can merge our docs. But let me just like pause there. So like those two steps, I feel like could be automated, or it should not be a manual process. And I just wanted to bring this up and talk about it and whether it was worth pursuing. I guess for the next quarter, I guess. But
So-
does it make sense to automate like adding the milestone? I don't know exactly how, but maybe we can discuss that too.
So this is about if I have documentation that's going to go in, for example, the dev 120 release. So it's not going to be merged into master just yet until 120 comes out. When I open up that PR, potentially, and me being an end user, customer, docs consumer, author of PR, when I open up that PR, some sort of automation would add a milestone and a hold. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And then I do see here automate placeholders. Is that related or a separate piece of automation?
No, that's separate. Let's keep that separate.
Okay. I personally don't have any questions about this. I do question, I guess I do have questions, but I do consider how easily that could be automated. And much like the link checker, I wonder if it might be easier to educate folks and say, here's the process when you open this PR, have, you know, / milestone. Well, I guess they couldn't apply the milestone because of permissions. Sorry, I'm talking out loud here.
Yeah, that's another thing that I'm actually gonna fix in our role handbook, because, or not role handbook, but one of the documentation that we have out there for folks. It's that like they should apply the milestone, which then would notify us, but I actually don't get notified at all for that. So it actually doesn't work as expected. So we should remove that instruction or something. But anyways, that's not the point. The point was that maybe like if they make a PR to the future release branch, like it'd be cool to see that the milestone gets added. Of course,
Okay.
I would need to research a little bit more, but I think the one that I think would be very beneficial would be the hold label for the KK, because there are times where it could happen that where we kind of miss that because it's not very visible in the docs PR whether the Kubernetes code got merged in or not. So if we had anything to make sure, like a safeguard, even for us, like I think that would be really helpful.
Got it. Yeah, and I see Zach has his hand up.
So I wonder, I guess with the caveat that it's been a while since I looked at what functionality Prow has, I wonder if it's possible to, either through Prow or maybe through GitHub Actions, to automate adding labels based on branch. So like if people open a PR against the development branch, against dev-1. whatever, to automatically add the milestone label and the hold label to those PRs. If that's something that we can automate through Prow or through a GitHub action, that seems completely reasonable to me. I am, all for automating toil. So if there's a solution available, that absolutely seems worthwhile, Anna.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna try to look at Prow for that, but I can also take a look at GitHub Actions. Yeah.
Cool. And I'm sorry, Karen, I saw you were off mute as well.
No, I would second what Zach said. I do agree. I was just going to ask Anna, what is the most important thing that you find it's not working for you. I think for me, from what I've noticed, and I've been through a few releases, that it's, you know, setting the milestone label and making sure you're on the right branch, and if your feature's actually gone in or not, and getting technical approval, and then docs approval. I think actually trying to put a label on it as soon as the PR is created, and that automatically creates at least the milestone, and alerts you or alerts the lead, the docs release lead. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all the steps, Karen. You got it. But I think like the alerting, and yeah, I think I like that idea of having, once the PR is open, it just labels it like hold and the milestone, and then we can do the action where we remove the hold if, you know, the KK gets merged in or something. That could be the first step, I guess.
One other thing, do authors, is there any anything with the feature that it's assigned a technical reviewer? Automatically, or does someone have to sign up and say, I'm responsible for approving this?
Oh my God, that's
For
actually
the feature, yes, I'm sure, but can that also, you know, correspond to getting the technical review for the doc? Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. So it all depends.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good idea. Well, I don't know what functionality does it, but like we get assigned automatically when PR gets created, right? So like, can we somehow use the owner's file of that SIG to like assign someone? Or maybe it doesn't work like that because they probably have a schedule too, right? But that'd be really cool.
Yeah, and I would echo that. More automation, the better. Where it makes sense, you know, where we can easily find wins here. I know that many moons ago, the tech reviewers is more, I guess, as needed. So like when you're looking at an enhancement and you'd say, this is way out of my jurisdiction, this is like storage, I have no idea if this is accurate or not, I might go and ping SIG storage for a technical LGTM. However, if it's something very, I don't want to say straightforward, but maybe something that seems like it makes general sense to me. I see the enhancement, we remove this flag and the PR is removing that flag. Usually then I take the liberty as a documentarian to say, all right, this looks good to me, approve it, let it go out the door with the release. But it would be awesome to just attach, when you're doing an enhancement, who's going to review the tech docs, or be the tech reviewer for the docs. I think that'd be beneficial for sure.
I can take that as an action item and talk to the enhancement team, because I actually been improving their side too, adding like docs requirement in the enhancement issue template and stuff. So maybe that's also something that I can put in there.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely a strong +1 for this overall initiative to automate these components. But I do wonder, I seem to find a handful of PRs that are against master that should be against the dev branch. And I don't think that's a solution, or I don't think it's something that could be solved necessarily on this call. But I don't know how that, to me, that's a bigger problem. Like, all right, we can figure out a way to automate when a PR gets opened up against development branch, maybe these actions then occur. But if someone opens up against master, I wonder if there's a way to potentially fix that as well. Just talking out loud.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot as well. So that's in my mind as well.
But and much like Karen was talking about as well, I've done PR Wrangler shifts where I'm like borderline ready to looks good to me and approve a PR, then I realize it's for an enhancement or for a dev doc or something like that, and I have to put the brakes on and switch it up or request them to move that. So like I said, I wouldn't discourage that conversation to displace the conversation around automating what we can automate, but something worth keeping in our minds as well. And Zach, I see you got your hand up.
No, just +1 to that last bit there. I wouldn't let the fact that this is also a question stop you, Anna, from automating the pieces that you can.
Okay.
Cool. So I will include this for review, just general tracking. If we can help at all, let us know. And then I do see here something about automating placeholders.
Yeah, so I actually got a question from the enhancement team asking, like, what is the point of placeholders? And I kind of said it's to like make sure that enhancement owners are aware of docs requirement earlier, and then they get ready for it, because we don't get that much time after code freeze, right? But at the same time, I kind of agree with them in the sense that, like, before the code freeze, everyone's so focused on the code itself, right? Like, no one really cares about docs, and it takes us a lot of pings just for them to create a placeholder. And I guess it's more of a question, and I think that's the intent. Please correct me if that's wrong, or if there's a better reason why we have placeholders. But I like to understand a little bit more about placeholders, and whether is that something that we can like automate possibly also. Yeah.
So I believe I can give a little bit of context on placeholders, or at least what purpose I see them serving, and folks can feel free to agree or disagree with this. But I think it's a matter of getting someone to do something. You know, I think it's finding that level of involvement that we can ask, the very bare minimum involvement we can ask from an enhancements owner, saying, can you just create the placeholder? Much like you were talking about during code freeze, everybody is focused on getting that feature merged, getting all the different pieces in. Maybe they can't be bothered with the docs, but at the very least they can open up a placeholder PR and do that one initial step. And I would say, hopefully, if I was an author of an enhancement, instead of opening the placement PR and already going through the effort of doing that, maybe I would just create the documentation needed, hopefully. And if not, maybe I am so swamped getting my enhancement into KK or Kubernetes repos, maybe all I can do is open the placeholder PR. But now I've taken that single step of action saying, I'm serious about this enhancement. I'm the owner of this enhancement's documentation. And now from the release team's perspective, there's a single person to contact for that documentation, as well as now you don't need to poke a, SIG storage I've been talking about today. Instead of poking that entire SIG, you can say, oh, I see Jim Angel open this PR. Let me contact him and say, where's this PR at? So I would be against automating it, just because I think the bar is very low to ask for opening a placeholder PR. But that's under the understanding that I have of, we're asking you to do the bare minimum it takes to get started in this process, given code freeze and all the other expectations at hand. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Agree, disagree, etc. Karen?
I agree with you. I like seeing the placeholder PRs come in, because I think it gives, I don't look at the list of enhancements, or I'm not very actively looking at them. So I really like it when I see a placeholder, because then it gives me a heads up and say, I know something's coming. It's not there, but it should be coming. So I think it's really good. I think it's good for the docs to at least have that there.
Okay, then it sounds like we should keep the process that we have right now. So that's okay. I just wanted to know a little bit more insight into it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that an automated placeholder is just as good or just as bad as no placeholder PR created by the author, in my opinion. Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of our proposals and the end of our quarterly review and planning meeting. Does anyone else have any proposals they want to talk about, or any other overarching projects that they didn't include in the agenda?
Good job, Jim.
Thanks. Yeah, I got big shoes to fill. I think, Zach, you set the bar pretty high. There's no official dance party, and I regret to inform everyone there probably won't be a dance party as long as I'm chairing these. So
Probably for the best.
I don't know about that. Cool. Well, here nothing. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their evening or morning to have this discussion, and I look forward to more action this next quarter. I'll talk to y'all later.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.